Senate Republicans have decided to block the progress of a COVID-related funding bill. In fact, they're holding that bill hostage in an effort to preserve Trump-era immigration policies, notably Title 42. So Title 42, we've talked about it on this show repeatedly, but I'll remind you, or if you haven't watched those episodes, I'll tell you what it's about. Essentially, it was Trump's way of preventing immigrants and asylum seekers from entering the country during the coronavirus pandemic. Now, of course, Trump never took the coronavirus pandemic very seriously, but he did like citing it as his emergency order to prevent people from coming in or crossing our borders. Now, Biden came in, he didn't repeal that law, he kept it in place, despite the fact there was a lot of pressure among immigration activists, among progressives to do something about that terrible policy, which of course did nothing to slow the spread or stop the spread of COVID in America. He didn't really want to do anything about it until now. And Republicans are using this, they're exploiting it really as a campaigning opportunity and as a way of blocking COVID funding, which is desperately needed to ensure that people can get tested, they can get treated, they can get their vaccines for free. Without the COVID funding, you're on the hook for quite a bit of money if you want to get tested for COVID, to the tune of $125 each time. And that's according to Quest Diagnostics, which does COVID testing. Now, Senate Republicans on Tuesday threatened to tank a new $10 billion coronavirus relief package unless Democrats allow a vote on an amendment to preserve Title 42, a Trump-era border expulsion program that the Biden administration is moving to end after months of sustained pressure from immigrant rights groups. In fact, here is Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell explaining exactly what his demands are. Let's watch.
Is there going to be an amendment on Title 42 in order to get this COVID bill across the finish line?
Yeah, I think there'll have to be an amendment on Title 42 in order to move the bill. There are several other amendments that we're going to want to offer, and so we'll need to enter into some kind of agreement to process these amendments in order to go forward with the bill.
And keep in mind that the amendment that Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans want to implement, and by the way, not just Senate Republicans, there are Democrats involved as well. Well, that amendment is what's holding COVID funding hostage. And that amendment has nothing to do with public health. Okay, they are basically holding up incredibly important funding that would benefit their own right-wing voters. It would ensure that their right-wing voters get coverage if they need to get monoclonal antibody treatment because they got sick with COVID. They're willing to block that funding. They're willing to put their own constituents, their own supporters in financial ruin in order to ensure that this ridiculous policy at the border stays in place. Fact of the matter is, asylum seekers should be processed, okay? That's not to say that every single person who claims asylum should be let in the country. We have immigration judges for that. We've reported on the show earlier that Biden proposed a plan that would essentially allow for other individuals within the immigration system to process these claims because we are short on immigration judges, and that's why we have this massive backlog. He has a plan in place. But if you listen to the lies coming from people like Mitch McConnell, he would have you think otherwise. Let's watch.
On Friday, the Biden administration announced an unbelievably bad decision. They're going to further cave to the far left that wants open borders. They're going to cancel Title 42 this spring with no real border security plan to replace it.
Wait, but what happened to Trump's big, beautiful wall? I mean, I thought that he built a wall. He appropriated tens of billions of dollars for it. What happened?
This is such an absurd decision, such an unforced gap, that even some of our Senate Democratic colleagues have come out swinging. Our colleague from West Virginia correctly described this as a frightening decision to abandon an essential tool when we're already facing an unprecedented increase in immigrants.
abandon an essential tool. The essential tool is to pretend like people aren't seeking asylum at the border and just immediately expel anyone who's trying to come in. That is the important rule that Mitch McConnell is talking about. Because look, we know that they don't believe in asylum seekers being allowed into the country. We know that they don't care about refugees. We know that. I mean, they've shown themselves to be pretty callous when it comes to individuals fleeing countries that we, through our foreign policy, have destabilized. That we, through some of our domestic policy, have destabilized. A result of our drug war, for instance, emboldening all sorts of cartels and criminal gangs in countries where we're seeing people flee and come to the United States for safety. We know that Mitch McConnell doesn't care about those people. We get it. But fact of the matter is, the people coming to the border seeking asylum have rights, whether you want to believe it or not, and they should be processed. Now, I think there's a moral obligation also to process them, but morality is arbitrary. My morality might be different from other people. I just happen to believe that if you destabilize countries, if you have policies, implement policies that lead to criminal gangs exploding in countries, maybe you have a little bit of a responsibility to address that issue, not just the root causes, which I think is a real fix, but in the short term, to at least hear these individuals out, hear what they've been going through, or whether or not they have a real asylum claim that should be considered. But McConnell doesn't want to do that. Okay, fair enough. He did cite some Democratic colleagues because you can imagine in this self-interested, narcissistic congressional climate, you are gonna have some corporate Democrats who are gonna side with people like Mitch McConnell. There are also Democrats who are terrified of this issue being used against them in campaigning. So last week, the CDC announced that Title 42 would no longer be in effect as of May 23rd. Outraging anti-immigrant Republicans and drawing objections from Democratic lawmakers, including Joe Manchin, Mark Kelly, Catherine Cortez Masto. Those are the three. Shockingly, Kyrsten Sinema hasn't voiced her opposition to the repeal of Title 42, but who knows? Pause. It's possible. We'll see what happens. But the point is, the COVID funding will not pass unless Republicans and some Democrats in the Senate get what they want with the continued implementation of Title 42. But then you go over to the House and you got a problem there because the Hispanic caucus in the House is not willing to vote for any legislation that includes the Title 42 amendment. So they're also willing to hold up the COVID funding, which is certainly concerning because people are still getting COVID. A lot of Americans are still unvaccinated because of all the disinformation they've been consuming on right-wing media and Joe Rogan's podcast, unfortunately. So when they get really sick and they need monoclonal antibodies to stay alive, they might get it, but there's no government subsidy for that treatment that costs literally thousands of dollars. Now, again, the House Hispanic caucus has said no. There's dozens of them in that caucus, and they've said no, we're not going to vote for a COVID funding bill that includes an amendment that continues or preserves Title 42. So what we have at the end of the day is more of the same in Congress. Inaction, unwillingness to make hard decisions, unwillingness to fight, honestly, when it comes to Senate Democrats. And they would need 60 votes in the Senate to pass this bill. Remember, they still have that legislative filibuster in place. So far, the legislation has been blocked by Republicans in the Senate. We'll see where it goes. But if I had to put my money on it, it's very likely that there will be no funding for COVID-related issues, including testing, vaccinations, and treatments. So look forward to that.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.